Okay, we're just getting settled here, but we will get ourselves started. We can have as many, well, wait, where does it get down here? Okay. Oh, yeah, let's grab a couple chairs. Marcia, what the heck? Okay, sorry. Welcome to FlowTex. It's the last day of the 2025 conference. Can't believe we're here already, but we've had 2 excellent days so far. And I think that this one's going to be really fun too. So we're doing something we haven't done in a formal way before. And I suppose you can't argue that this is formal either. But what we wanted to do was a lot of people have mentioned this and informally, and also it's like feedback we get on the surveys that a lot of people who are not already in flow are like, how do you kind of transition into it? And I think a lot of people also don't know how many jobs there are in flow. And we're not just throwing a lot of people out there so that you know there's a lot of jobs, but I mean, there's a lot of variety in the jobs and how people got here and the kind of skills that you need for them. And so the idea was we're just going to throw a bunch of people who have, varied experience so that you can get an idea of sort of what's out there and how can you get there. So it is informal, but the idea we're really hoping is that we get a lot of engagement from the audience, both here and online, and that you can just ask all the questions that you want, that you're interested in, and we're going to have sort of an open discussion about careers. So here's the structure for our speakers. I simply cannot introduce them all, so they've got to do it themselves. And I'm going to start, but here's what I want from you: is your name, your job, your current job, and then just the briefest rundown of kind of how you got to where you are in this career. Please don't start with where you were born and all that. Just, we're gonna cap you probably at 2-3 minutes. So I'm gonna go first. My name is Sarah Schnieder. I'm currently a graduate student at MD Anderson. And how I got into flow, I right after college worked as a research assistant in a lab where we were doing immune and cell profiling on clinical trial correlate assays. I did not particularly like that job, but I did meet really good people in flow, and then eventually worked in the MD Anderson South Campus Flow Core, where I really fell in love with it and got to meet everybody in FlowTex and around the career. And now I kind of see the future for myself, where I hope to have my own lab and hopefully direct a core in the future.
Great.
No clapping.
Great. Yeah. Didn't know what we were doing. That's all. My name is Meredith Weiglars. I am the manager of the UTMB Flow Core. I graduated with a degree in physics and secondary education, moved to Thailand to teach English for a little bit, came back to the States during the recession, couldn't get a job. My friend needed a roommate, moved to Boston, got the first job that I could at a Flow Core, lucky me. Decided, wow, this is pretty awesome. Those Harvard postdocs look pretty miserable, as do the PhD students. So said, PhD, we're out. Moved to California, worked at a small biotech for a little bit, then moved to work at Stanford at the Flow Core there, and then moved with my husband, who's a PI at UTMB, to run the UTMB Flow Core.
So my name's Peter Mage. I'm a principal engineer in the Advanced Technology Group at BD. I've been there for about 6.5 years. So it's my first and only real job. I was a postdoc before that and did my PhD in materials engineering before that. So I was interested in interdisciplinary kind of biology-related work and had some connections through my lab that got me to BD and really liked the team. And that was why I decided to join. And it ended up being kind of a right time, right place kind of thing. And I've been able to work on some cool stuff.
I'm David Haviland. I'm the Flow Core Director over at Methodist Research Institute, kind of in that general direction. I got entangled with flow cytometry in graduate school. And flow cytometry has always been part of what I've been doing, whether I was at graduate school, my postdoc, or when I came here to Texas. Somewhere around, I'm going to say, just short of about 1998 to 2000, I too, at one time, was a grant-funded investigator, and the whole grant game is just nuts, as we know. I got my grant funded when general medicine was funding as high as 18%. So that also dates me. Also, the first instrument I ever turned on was an Epix 5 with a C bench, if you know what that is. But then, even though you turn in solid bread and butter grants, when they come back triaged, there's only so many times you can take that. And I was looking at 3 doors. You know, there's a game show where you pick the doors. Door number one was I had a couple of companies saying, yeah, we could possibly use you in our TAS. Okay, fine, but nothing ever materialized. Door number 2 was teaching high school. Door number 3, that all transpired about 16 years ago up on the 6th floor of this building, was to just walk away from the bench and go flow full time. And that's what I did. So I've been doing flow for almost 30 plus years. But I wouldn't trade it for the world. I've got other stories, but I'll let others go for it from there.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Trahan. I am instrument sales specialist for BD Biosciences. Just like everyone else, I think flow is kind of a circuitous path for us. Well, except for Peter, he just jumped right into the deep end of the pool. I started out actually in cytotechnology, and I'm the person that screens pap smears, cerebrospinal fluids, and the like. And my first job was at NASA. And I was working on putting myself out of a job by automating the screening process for lung cancer. And so anyhow, we had a flow lab there, and the woman who was running the flow core said, how about we just cross-train each other, you know, to make ourselves a little more marketable. And so, like you, I started on an Epix 5, and that began the flow journey there. I moved on to manage a core facility at Baylor in Dallas, and then I was recruited by BD to essentially take the show on the road. And I went into applications for 3 years, then transitioned over into reagent sales. I did a hybrid role with reagents and instruments before I decided I really liked the instrument sales side of it. So that's how I've landed there with lots of support.
Hi, I'm Dan LeQuy. I am the Field Service National Systems Specialist. So I started with the Marine Corps, learned electronics in the Marine Corps, which led me into working at the depot repair for BD for the circuit boards for the flow cytometers, which led me into field service, which led me into this position today. I'm doing this about 23 years now. Now I kind of help shepherd in new products through with kind of like a service focus, training materials, all that kind of stuff. But it's been a pretty nice ride.
My name is Amy Haggerty. I'm a cytometry technologist too with the Baylor Cytometry and Cell Sorting Core. I started with my undergrad at University of Mary Hardin-Baylor, where I was also hired as a undergraduate research assistant with Texas A&M College of Medicine. From there, I finished my undergrad at Georgia Southern University. I was working as a TA until March of 2020. And then I graduated in December of 2020, and I immediately took a job at a public school, working as a 4th and 5th grade math and science teacher. I worked there for a few years, and then I accepted a position at Baylor College of Medicine as a research technician. From there, I took a basic analyzer course with the core. I was an unassisted user for about 6 months, and then I saw a position open up, and I took the opportunity. And I've been with the core now for about 9 months, and I absolutely love it. I feel like I'm learning every day, which I love.
Hi, I'm Ville Meretöja. I'm a flow core manager here in this building. So there has been a couple of people in between, but basically the position that David had 20 years ago or something. I have a PhD from bioengineering back in Finland before I came as a postdoc here in Houston, and then a couple of different spots before my PI basically retired or had his own spin-off company, and then I was looking at, okay, what's I'm gonna do next, and this position just happened to be at the right time in this correct place. I like more like instruments. I have worked with bacterial fermentation tanks and liquid chromatography systems and 3D printers, and now with flow cytometers. So.
My name is Jeff Cracker. I work at OMIC as a senior, basically application scientist. I started in Flow. I got a job just as like a fresh-faced post-undergraduate at the Flow Core at at Northwestern in Chicago. And I was a tech in the core and also kind of a research assistant for Chuck Goolsby's research lab there. And essentially, spent about 4 years there, and I ended up talking to the guy who started Cytobank, and he was like, hey, I really need somebody who can visit the East Coast people because I'm sick of flying from California all the way up to Boston every month. And he said, would you like to, be basically our app sci? And I said, sure, I'd love to. And so essentially that kind of started me in the past 12 years of doing kind of cytometry analysis with kind of a focus on high parameter analysis algorithms. And at my positions in between, it's been essentially just that, but I love it. I think it's interesting, and I love the field.
Hi, I'm Carla Moncada. I'm on the business development team at KCAS Bio. We're a bioanalytical CRO, and I specialize in flow cytometry there. I've been in flow cytometry for 19 years, and I started after I graduated from college. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I had a biology degree, and I really liked being in the lab. So I got a research assistant job at Trinity University. I was there for a couple of years, and the grant ended, the PI was retiring. So it was time to find a new job. And I found one in the flow core. I came in with no experience and no idea what flow cytometry was. But I did some waitressing in college. I worked at a makeup counter. So I really liked the customer service aspect of it. And I liked that it was also science, right? And from there, I was at the flow cytometry core for 15 years. I later was working with Ben Daniel, which you'll meet soon. Love working with Ben at the flow core. Then in 2021, I joined Cytech. I was the TAS for their CS for about a year. And I transitioned over to reagent sales, where I actually worked for Marcia. And I was in that position for about a year. Then I transitioned over to be a strategic account manager before I was laid off, and joined Nadexis, a startup for microfluidic cell sorters, for about 6 months before I found my position at KCAS. So I'm really excited about using flow cytometry to help advance medicine. And I really think that this community is one of the most accepting and open communities. So if you're looking for a career in flow cytometry, I think that you have a lot of options.
So hi, I'm Nicolas Love. I'm an informatics solution leader for BD Informatic or Flojo. So with my accent, you can hear that I'm from France. I did my master's degree. Went to Baylor, Dallas to do an internship. I got hired as a research assistant in the HIV lab. After that, stayed there for a couple of years. My PI moved to industry, so I was looking for a job, and Elizabeth was looking for a technician in the core, so I joined her, and we ran the core for a few years before she left. After she left, I moved up, took the managing position in that core. The institute was not doing great at the time, so I decided to move to another institution. I moved to UT Southwestern, where I thought was a great opportunity was to create a new flow core there that became the Moody Foundation flow cytometry core at the Research Institute. And after 10 years in the core, I thought that I did everything I had to do. It was just a routine for me. I wanted to have more challenges. decided to move to BD and FlowTex, and been there for 4 years now.
Right, I'm Ben Daniel. I work at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, where I head up the research flow core there. Really pretty large instrumentation. So I got my undergraduate in physics as well. But I realized I didn't have the brain power to do it. So I started taking. So I started taking chemistry and biology, and I ended up getting a PhD in immunology. And in my first rotation in my introduction into flow cytometry is with Elizabeth 25 years ago, summer of 1999.
It's a good year for flow cytometry.
It was a great year. So obviously I did a very short stint at Baylor, Dallas, and my PI followed him. He moved around a little bit, and I followed him around, got my PhD. Went on and did a postdoc with the same person. Not something I'd recommend to people, but that was my trajectory. Got on as junior faculty, AKA glorified postdoc, and got some small grants, working my tail off. Largely missed the first 2 years of my daughter's life in a way, so working so much, and I had to have a change. I was burnt out, and this awesome opportunity came up to direct the flow core at that same institution. So Carla hired me to work there, where we changed the face of flow cytometry at that university together, and did that for about 7 years. And then Regeneron knocked at the door and convinced me to move to New York. So I've been there for about 7 years, almost 8 years, actually.
Awesome. So I'm Marsha Hartman, and currently I am a fractional CEO, which we'll go over what that is in a second, at a company, a very small startup out of Arizona called Exodyme. So that means I work 2 days a week for them. Other than that, I'm retired, and I do some consulting on the side. My parents were serial entrepreneurs, had lots of businesses that they started, took over businesses and turned them around. So when I told them I wanted to be a scientist, they were like, we don't raise scientists. They were pretty shocked. I did my undergrad in chemistry. I actually came here to do my MD PhD at Baylor College of Medicine. And while I was in that program, realized I wanted to be a epidemiologist. So I'm trained as an epidemiologist. There were no epidemiologists really doing anything in immunology. And that's how I ended up in Dorothy Lewis's lab at Baylor College of Medicine. And we actually did a lot of work to show that you can use interleukin-7 for interferon gamma assays, which at the time the TB assays weren't being used in HIV positive individuals or pediatric patients. And from there, I actually met Ed Gravis because he's a big TB guy, and that's how I got hooked up with David Haviland. And we started so Ed Gravis ran the BSL-4 lab. And so I worked in the BSL-4 lab doing flow cytometry. And I was the scientist who loved working with vendors. I loved trying their new products. I loved putting posters together, talks together. So they constantly tried to hire me. And BD actually, Lisa Gregg called me up and said, you should come work for me. Well, BD had never hired a PhD person before. So I went through, I think, 12 interviews to get that job. And then I was sales rep rookie of the year, sales rep of the year. So just actually, I was wanting to bring Euroflow. So tons of people had asked. The reason I went to BD is they were standardizing flow cytometry, which David Haviland and I had used CS&T beads to do the standardization. And so I asked questions during the interview that I could tell that the company wasn't using CS&T. And so that's really what made me powerful as a rep, was going in and helping standardize people's stuff. So from there, the VP of sales actually moved to Sony Biotechnology to start this thing called spectral flow cytometry. So I worked at Sony for 2 years before they really made it apparent they weren't going to go into the clinical world. And the clinical world is really what I had loved and hooked up with, I would say, FlowTex at BD to start the clinical sessions here, which we have the only clinical sessions in the US. So went back to BD, spent 10 total years at BD before I went to Cytec to basically start their reagent team. And that's was there why Cytec went public. So only 2 short years at Cytec. And when I was at Sony, we had instruments at UCSF. So I was an associate professor at UCSF, spent a lot of time putting panels together and working in the lab. And that's where I met this little company who was using hydrogels in makeup, putting peptides on them so that they could use them for skincare. And I talked them into making these little cells. And that's how Slingshot came to be, found their original investors for them. And so when I was at Cytec, Slingshot had asked several times for me to come and run their commercial team, but that's why I moved to Slingshot, spent about 1.5 years there. I started saying that I wanted to be retired before I went to Cytec at BD. I'd tell everybody, I want to retire, I want to retire. And so basically, after not even like barely 1 year at Slingshot, I had been like 1.5 years, I told them I wanted to retire. And now here I am working 2 days a week for a company. So kind of long, but that's me.
Blimey, how do I follow that? I'm an underachiever. I'm Paul Mead. I'm a director of the translational immunopathology at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And I also have the job of being technical director of the clinical flow cytometry. And the 2 jobs sort of go hand in hand. So I did my undergrad and graduate work in New Zealand, and then did a postdoc at Harvard for about 6 years, and then went into the academic route after about 12 years or so like that, and had similar sort of experience as David mentioned about grant funding, but I saw it from the other side. I was actually, one of the really enlightening points for me was I was co-chairing a study section, and we had a group of 30 grants that were fantastic, and we were scoring them. Got to the end of the study section and found out none of them were being funded. This is around like 2012 after the Great Recession, and it was really disheartening. And around that time, I was offered to take on a position as being director of the translational flow lab, and they set that up to be as a sort of a place where we could develop new tests for the clinical flow lab, and also to do any clinical trial-related flow studies that for our investigators that were doing research aims associated with clinical. And then that sort of naturally led into me being also the technical director of the clinical flow lab. And so that's sort of how I got to be where I am.
Okay, thank you very much for the introductions. And also you guys did such a good job staying on time. Unbelievable. But so I was going to kind of pose this as a question, but I think I'll just make the point because we're already starting to get some good questions online, which is what you can see is that there's a lot of interconnectedness, and a lot of the way that many of us got our jobs is by meeting and talking to each other. So kind of the takeaway from this whole session is that you got to just hang out with people, talk a little bit about flow cytometry and your interests, and they can help kind of guide you to the right place. Or if they have a job to offer, then they know that you are very good at what you do, and they can invite you to come too. Okay, I'll also say if anybody in the audience has questions, we have a few online, but I will slot you right in. So the first question is about the SCYM certification. So from the panel, let's get hands up if you have that certification. Okay.
I think it's expired, but yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Mine is definitely not expired. Thank you, David, for giving me my credits.
That's right. Oh, if you need credits, email David Haviland. Okay, so the question is, do you recommend getting the certification if you want to transition from research to either clinical or industry? So what I'll ask is, now let's raise your hand if you hire for clinical or industry jobs on the panel. Not me, but certainly some of you do. Ben, I'm assuming you can hire people if you want. So what's your perception on when you're hiring? Is that something that you're looking for on that end? And then if you have it, has it been beneficial to your career? So we'll start with the first one. When you hire, is that something that you look for?
I don't know how many people are going to answer this. I can answer it. So for me, it is not for me something I look for, but when I hire, and I've hired several people in this room, I always make them bring and I put an activity together that they have to show me they know what they're talking about. I don't give them answers. I make them actually give me, like I'll give them a tough paper and it has a totally different outcome than they think and see if they can catch the twist in the paper. So if they have the certification, it's going to be, you know, a bonus, but it's not something that I've ever used as a.
Can we hear maybe from Paul on this? Because
Yep.
you do actually have, you know, people doing clinical work.
Yeah, yeah. So I hire for both, you know, I help hire for both the clinical lab and the, so most of our med techs that come on have the med tech degree. Some of them also have the SCYM, or they've come in from the research side and then had the SCYM. So that's on the clinical side, it's a requirement. They have to have either to be able to work in a clinical environment. So that is definitely, you know, a factor, of course. Then on the sort of research or translational side, it's not necessarily a requirement that I ask for. It's, but once they join the lab, I strongly encourage them to use their time to actually do the certification. So I've got a junior member in my lab at the moment, and she'll be sitting an exam as soon as she's eligible and done enough years of flow. She came into the lab with basically no flow experience, but you know, she was really keen, and so that was more important for me. But once she had the requirements of the number of years working in a flow cytometry lab, then I strongly encourage to do the SCYM, and that will definitely help with their ability to get promoted and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it definitely aids their career.
Yeah, I think the SCYM will definitely help as far as clinical. As far as research, it's not a requirement for me. If they have it, it's fine. If not, I'm more than happy to help them get it if they want it, if they want to go in that direction. But as my understanding, since it's under ICCS now, more of the questions are going to end up being a little bit more on the clinical side. So researchers would not necessarily know the difference between EDTA and sodium citrate and why to use one versus the other. But that is a nitty-gritty point on the clinical side. I'll be the dark horse here. I've run into people who I assess people and their people skills. I hired my first tech because she put in a year and a half with okay. Sorry, hopefully that all came through, but my first tech put a year and a half into Starbucks. That's it. She knows how to deal with the public. My thing when I'm bringing in a tech is how are they going to deal with the customer from the client from hell? What are they going to do? What are they going to do with the PI from hell? I have come across people that are SCYM that I would not let into my core. Brutally. I do want to take a 2-minute digression, if I may, particularly for the core directors here. I'll bet Joel a steak dinner he's had this. 4 kinds of people come into our course. One, they come in and say, okay, here's my stuff. I got something else to do. I'll be back. It doesn't happen so much in the analyzers, but the conversations happen in the analyzer room, but it really happens in the sorter room. For whatever reason, there's an invisible neon sign that only stressed techs, stressed postdocs, and stressed faculty can see. And it says bartender, life counselor, you know, whatever you want. People come in and tell us their life stories. So that's number one. Number 2, they go in, they drop off their stuff, they sit off in the corner and they play with their phone. Option number 3, they drop off their stuff, they go sit in the corner and they pass out because the white noise of the machine just puts them out. The 4th person that comes in says, okay, Liz, since, just because you're here. Okay, our gates are doing okay. Oh, how did you get to what you're doing? Because my life sucks and I don't like where I am. I don't like my PI, or I'm a PhD in a clinical department and I'm absolutely miserable because I don't have 2 R01s, or I've got a PhD and I don't want to do grants. These are the kind of people we end up talking to and interacting with. Disaffected techs. Leave no doubt, there is a shortage of techs out there. It took me 14 months before I went from one tech to another, and I've got 7 instruments, and I had to run the course solo for 14 months. No, I'm not expecting sympathy. I've been a one-man show for most of my life. But these are the things we need to get out. That's why I'm really excited about this session and trying to get feedback and interaction with you. So talk to your flow core people. That's the best way to get in.
So if you don't mind switching to, if you've got the certification, has it been beneficial? Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm gonna play the advocate for the certification in the concept of my husband is a PI. He was a postdoc. That's why we moved to California. When he was a postdoc is when I got my certification, and I got my certification for the flexibility of when he became a PI, he could potentially go anywhere in the country. And what if he went to a smaller school? I don't have a PhD, so sometimes those smaller schools are like, oh, they're not as qualified because they don't have the PhD. But what did happen with the university that I'm at was they saw my certification and they immediately believed that I had more qualifications than someone with a PhD. So it gave me an extra check mark for flexibility of where I wanted to go and to be able to get the type of job that I deserved. It was just like a little extra thing. I personally don't believe that if you are working in a core, it does not require that much effort to study for this test. It is not a huge cost, and potentially your core will pay for it. That being said, my other 2 cents about the clinical aspect of the test. There is a clinical aspect of the test. So if you're on the research side or even on the clinical side, you feel like you might not know the other half of it, there's only a certain amount of percentage of questions that you have to get right to pass the test. And that percentage is surprisingly low. I think it's lower than
Holy
it's
cow, 60%.
60%. And they're and they're when I took it, there was only 20% clinical. So even if you get all those clinical questions wrong, you can still get questions wrong on the research side, but there's a lot of questions that go between both research and clinical. So it's not a huge cost. I highly recommend it.
I'm gonna make a comment, but come on up, Joel. Okay, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Well, okay.
Go make
Yeah,
your comment.
please. Well, just my comment again, as somebody who has the certification, I've had 2 big benefits. One is that I had a great core director who pushed MD Anderson to give us extra money for having it. So she got us certification pay for it. It was not a ton of money, but it was enough to say you took the time to do it. Like Meredith said, it's not a lot of effort. If you're already working in Flow and you're really starting to get into this, and it's a little extra designation. Did they forget every single year to put that on my paycheck when they renewed and did the stuff? Yes, but that's because it's a huge bureaucracy, but they put it back eventually. And then the second thing is that actually now I'm back in research. It has been something that my PI can put into her grants because it's like a, ASCP backed thing to be like, look, we really have the expertise in this. So there's a benefit on the research side too, I'll say.
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback on that. When as I have developing a career path within my, as I'm developing a career path within my own facilities, I utilize that as well for promotion. If I have arguments with human resources over how qualified someone is, I can then that actually counts as the certification counts as a level of education that you can attest to it, and it's a little easier to argue. So it's a helpful tool sometimes.
Yeah, and I will say, Ben and I actually use this as well as a tool to convince our administration to give me a promotion, because I also don't have a PhD. So it was really difficult when we were trying to develop a career path and to justify increasing my pay or changing my title. They pushed back really hard. And once I was certified, Ben was able to go back and say, she has the certification, she's bringing value. So I think you can use it in a core facility as a good metric for your people to be able to elevate them a little bit. That being said, in the interviews that I've had, most of the positions that I've gotten because I really know the people that I've been interviewing with. I've worked on building a deep network. So most of the jobs that I've gone in and interviewed for, I've known somebody who has recommended me and said, hey, you should apply for this. This looks like something that, would be great for you. So I would emphasize like the networking part very heavily.
I'm gonna cut us off on this because we have a ton of questions, but let's go to Matilda.
I'll take one. So it seems from hearing from a lot of people on the panel that oftentimes you needed to move to get to a new job. And I think it's a problem within cores that the ladder within a core can be limited. Is there, I mean, Joel's doing some great work, I think, on this, but can anyone talk about like in-house career projections? Like,
And I'll expand that not just at a core, because a lot of us do work in cores, but let's talk about also the structures outside of that, like in a company like BD, which maybe has a little more structure and maybe is a good reason for moving. But anyway, yeah.
I'm just gonna make a point that I think you and I talked about earlier at this conference. A lot of universities are consolidating their cores down to like one flow core for the whole university. I worked in Boston for many years, and Boston has not yet consolidated their cores. That's actually a huge benefit, and it's one of the reasons why in a heartbeat I would go back to Boston, because there's more, it's easier to get career progression because you can move cores but still be in the same city and go upward. There's just more upward mobility and more dynamic movement throughout the cores. So I know that we don't have the power to change the core consolidation, but I think it is a huge benefit of why core consolidation is not always a good thing.
I failed, by the way. She succeeded where I failed.
So I was able to wrap it up. But we really worked together on letting the university know that the people in the core facilities have a different level of experience. You can't just have a rotating door. We needed to make sure that we were retaining people, we were giving them opportunities to grow. And initially, I came into the core as a research assistant. That was my title. So we argued for evaluating the position, right? What is that called?
Specialist?
No, it was we audited the role, and it was very clear that I wasn't a research assistant. So Ben and I developed a structure where we had incoming technologists. As technologists, we were able to increase the pay scales to differentiate research assistants, research associates. We made a ladder there to come in as like technologists where you can do 1, 2, 3. We also had a vision to have a technical director and assistant director and director of the core. The lab wasn't that big, so we actually didn't need that many positions. It was just the two of us. we felt like the structure was a way to move into give people a way to do that.
I think it's, you also have to be in a place where you have support from your HR and from your direct leadership. You know, when I pushed really, really hard to expand the ladder at the core, I got so much pushback from our HR department. And sometimes it takes people leaving, you know, or something like that for people's eyes to open. And I think that's why Carla was able to succeed where I failed. And we did make some progress at that time. And also when I left, there was some changes in the leadership as well. So it wasn't just me. And so there's some new leadership, I think, that were more willing to listen.
You have a comment? Go to the microphone.
We have a very engaged online.
I just want to follow up on that because I came in and became the faculty director for the core that Ben and Carla had established, and their work on developing that ladder was really important. But it's we've continued to get some pushback, but I think it's important that you have faculty leadership, but also
leadership in the VPR's office or whoever runs cores. And it's really important for the technical director and the faculty director to advocate constantly for the core. I see this all the time. It's real easy for executive leadership at an institution to sort of forget how important cores are. We see their value because we see the amount of support we provide to laboratories all the time, the grants that they get, but institutional leadership sometimes just loses sight of that. So it's really important to have several advocates within the kind of leadership structure. And so as members of cores, like if you're a technical director or the director of the core, it's important to take every opportunity you can to communicate the successes of the core, push your leadership to allow you venues to present about the core, and get your faculty users to advocate for the core. So this is a little bit off topic, but I think it's important in trying to establish a career ladder is to constantly be reminding the leadership of how important the work the core does. And these people are special. They have special skills, and it's a professional career path that needs to be supported. So I'll just.
So I agree. I want to mention that as when I was a core director, it's very important. And some of the things that I was able to get accomplished is because I had those faculty, really powerful faculty advocates that I was able to get on my side for whatever the topic was, right? Again, it kind of goes back into networking, but set up those relationships with your faculty members, because they're the ones, especially the more funded, the higher powerful ones, those are the ones that are going to give you more weight when you go into the VPR office or deans or the higher ups.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment that I think fits in both academia and industry. You also need to be pretty honest with yourself about your management structure. So the people who are above you, just how Carla said, Ben went and kind of like fought for her and removed some boundaries. I know at BD, they have a really nice career path, and you can, sort of say, this is where I want to see my career progress to. I certainly saw my career progress quite a bit at BD. When I left to go to Cytech, I want to call out that Dave Hickey, who was the president of the life sciences business, called me like 3 days later and said, what does it take to get you back to BD? And the reason I'm telling you that is because it's important, even what I said to Dave Hickey, you've got to keep your people. You don't want them taking those interviews, because by the time they give their word to another company, what does it look like to tell that other company, hey, I'm coming back to you, right? So what I'm saying is, as you guys become managers, it's incredibly important that you manage your people with your eyes wide open, and that you think about the fact that they want to have a career path, right? And that you keep them from, like, I have all the respect in the world for that phone call that was made to me. It's huge. It means the organization valued me, but you've almost got to do that in a way where they don't end up going somewhere else. I don't know if that makes sense, but just wanted to add that oversight.
Really great. I'm going to get to you, but we've got about 7 questions online. So you're next. I'll just do one of them. So we have I think a lot of good questions about kind of how do you make transitions, but let's go ahead and pick one. So if you're a technician, you're earlier in your career, what is something that you can do to distinguish yourself for like a future leadership role? So you can speak to stuff that you did that you think helped get you further in your career. And maybe it's not technician, but earlier in your career. And then also, like what you would look for if you're hiring somebody. And I think I'm going to have perhaps someone like Dan give us a chat, because he's moved up a lot.
Sure. Thank you. And the biggest thing is obviously be good at your job, right? That's the most important thing. But don't be afraid to move and take chances, right? Sometimes if you want to get that promotion or make that career lateral leap, you're going to have to move geographically. That's uprooting family sometimes. sometimes taking a plunge and moving to Texas. The other thing is get outside of your department a little bit. Don't just be, so for me, just don't be inside service. Talk to people in R&D, talk to people in manufacturing, make those connections, kind of get your name out there a little bit, and just be interested, not solely focused on your exact job, but more the whole technology in itself.
I'll let other people talk.
Yeah. If you were to look at my CV, you would see at each one of the cores I've worked at, I've held multiple titles within those cores. And I think one of the reasons that I've done that is when I'm in those annual review meetings, which everyone hates, you do have to fill out your goals every year, and your director or whoever is above you, your supervisor, needs to fill out their goals for you as well. And I have always made it very clear in those annual reviews, like, how do I get to the next step? Like, what is the next step for me? Like, what do I need to do to prove to you that I can take the next position? I think it's really important for young scientists to be open with what their goals are, where they want to go, but also hear from their supervisor, like, what does it take so that I can make sure that I'm working towards those things in the next year. But like Dan said, you have to be good at your job. If you're not good at your job, and you have to take initiative, which is, I think, also what Dan was saying, like, reach out. Like, if you're not pushing for it, you're not going to get it. Like, I'm not going to recognize someone that's just coming in and doing the 9 to 5 and going home and like doing the bare minimum. Like, you have to want it, because these jobs are very intensive.
And skip level meetings, right? So skip levels, if you guys don't know what that is, it's having a regular occurring meeting with your manager's manager. It's just important. It'll develop you to be, speaking several management structures ahead of you. And it also gives you ideas of what's inside the organization that your manager might not even know about.
Yeah, I want to follow that, like being proactive about taking opportunities when they arise to be noticed by other people in your organization, by customers. That could be if you get asked to describe what you do as a representative of your department, or if they need someone to help host someone who's visiting, right? Like these little things that feel random, but doing that, getting honestly FaceTime, name recognition, so that people realize you're good at your job and that you enjoy what you're doing is a really big thing. The other thing I was going to say to Meredith's point is if you gain a reputation for being someone who helps identify solutions and works on those and talks to people outside of just your team and kind of is just someone who gets things done, or that hey, they identified a problem and I know they're going to help find a solution to it. It doesn't matter what level you're at. That is incredibly valuable. And I've seen a lot of people at BD who started in more junior roles, but like people just know I can trust them. They're going to come up with a solution. They're going to escalate appropriately. And then that is huge for their career. So there is that sense of like, you need to own this, but at least a well-run company will usually or institution will recognize that, and there's a reward eventually.
I want to comment. You own your careers, and you've heard two people say take initiative. Doing a 9 to 5 job, just doing what your PI or your manager is asked of you is not taking initiative. You're just doing your job. Find the opportunities to learn new things. You seek out your doors. You seek out those opportunities to learn new assays, to have presentations. I have an opportunity to present. You present, you get your name out, you present well, it goes well, you build your network. I got my current job because I gave a presentation in a workshop at Cyto and someone there saw me. And so again, I didn't have to present, I wanted to present. So you own your career. You have to make your opportunities.
I'll kind of piggyback on that too, especially as like somebody more junior in this room. Like there's a little bit of a feeling I had at least that, okay, I'm not super experienced, so I shouldn't necessarily be the person organizing. And so, I'll remind, not that anybody here really needs it, but people who are more senior too, just a tiny invitation. It's up to you, like for a tiny invitation from a senior person to the junior person can bring them in. Now, we've invited tons of people to work on stuff and they say yes and then they don't show up. That's it then, right? But that little push, like I would not have joined the committee if Karen Dwyer hadn't suggested that I do. I wouldn't have gone to grad school if Karen Dwyer hadn't suggested that I do. So I did it and I'm doing it, but that little introduction too. And then the thing is, if you like it, you have to really do it, which is what everybody else already said.
I think on Sarah's point, I have mentored people who are more junior than me in my core that after I have left for other opportunities, left shortly after. And for those people that are in the manager position, remember that they need mentorship and they may be getting it from someone else who has left the core or the position. So if they're really connected to someone that's left, make sure that you as a supervisor are taking that extra effort to give them their mentorship, because they eventually left because they were no longer getting the direct mentorship from me. So I think that's also really important to make sure that if you have levels and someone is getting mentorship for one person, they leave, you have to provide them with that mentorship. Otherwise, they're going to leave as well.
Padmini.
Yeah, while she's going to the microphone, I'm just going to add, Peter, you said something that's really important, right? Enjoy. So we spend a lot of our day at work, a lot of our life at work. Make sure you're enjoying what you're doing. And if you don't find joy from it, figure out the reason. You know, is it the manager? Is it the people you work with? Is it the topic? You want to be doing something that you're passionate about, because you, at the end of the day, or at the end of your life, when you close your eyes, you want to look back and be like, I lived life to the fullest. We're not just here to work, right? So it's really joy first, career second. How do you find that joy?
Awesome. So I stood up for the previous question, but almost everything I wanted to say has been answered over here. So it's fantastic. But I'm sure there are people in the audience or in the online group as a postdoc where I was like 8 years ago, right? So I found myself as a postdoc, and one thing I wanted to say is just don't, as Ben was saying, just don't do your 9 to 5 and then go. For me, I always feel like, what can I do? I worked with the peer mentorship. I worked with the career development group. So it's just you have to put yourself out there so that you can understand what is available for you. And one day I was like, I know I'm not going to be writing an R01 grant for sure, right? When you have that realization, it should not be at the 5th year of your postdoc. You should just think about that before. But I did that. I was in my 5th year of my postdoc. I was like, I do not see myself writing a grant. What can I do? I had flow cytometry in my hand. So I reached out to Joel and I got a job in the flow cytometry. So it's just that you have to take stock of what you have and then see where you are good at and then just network, right? That's what I got from that. And then it's just that another thing with Joel, what I wanted to mention is you need to understand what your career is going to look like in 6 months or in a year or 5 years, right? You need to be able to have that conversation with your PI, just PI or even your managers. And fortunately enough, I have had that opportunity wherever I worked, and I was able to say, hey, this is what I'm looking at. What can I do to get there? You need to take definitely stock of what your career goals are and your annual performances that you're going to set up for. And Meredith talked about also. So it's like, it's just it's just that I want to put it out there that you just have to think ahead. Don't just think on your feet kind of thing. So yeah, and network and use your LinkedIn, right? Definitely use your LinkedIn, talk to people, and then have a path forward. Just don't panic at the time. That's
great.
Sorry, everybody spoke about what I wanted to, so just like, yeah.
Well, that means it's real advice. It's good advice.
Yeah, can I clarify something?
Please.
So a few of us have used the term like, don't just do the 9 to 5 and like find joy in your work. And that's all totally true. We're not saying work more than that.
Good point.
We're saying like,
yes.
use the time that you are giving to this institution, use it effectively and efficiently, and think about that strategically. Do not just say like, oh, I'm going to work 20-hour days and ruin my work-life balance. That's not what we're saying. ins-
100%.
organizations and the system will take that if you give it to them. So don't do that, but use the time that you are giving them very effectively, I think is what we're all saying.
Thank you for that clarification. I think actually, at least on the academic side, good reason to get into flow is that you can control your hours.
And we can take our PTO.
We can take PTO, yeah. Okay, another question from the internet. There's been a few kind of asking about how to effectively network. So we'll start with one, which we'll see who kind of identifies with this the strongest, and please speak to it. But networking strategies for people who maybe are not comfortable with public speaking and large groups and stuff like that, which is very real. And I think very real in science too. That's probably a lot of us. Now, we have maybe a biased sample size. A lot of us have worked in cores because we like interacting with people and maybe in large groups. But let's maybe speak to that.
So the way I think about networking, or like, I'm not very comfortable in public speaking or just meeting random people and start talking. To me, networking starts more like volunteering for something, that there is a project or something, or somebody asks that, can you help me with this one? And then I, instead of saying that, no, I rather stay at home, I say that, okay, yes. And then it starts organically from that. Yeah.
I'll say that if I was really uncomfortable with networking, especially starting earlier in my career. Being at BD has kind of forced me out of that a little bit, but poster sessions are like a really great format because there's something to talk about. There's someone there to talk about it. It's kind of time bound. And then if you're not feeling that, there's another poster you can go talk to. But like, just scientists love talking about their work, and I love hearing about their work and talking about my work. And so it's this nice kind of safe way to engage, but it gives this kind of universal thing of showing interest in what other people are doing, finding what they're interested in, asking questions. But that to me was like a really helpful way to start. And then at a conference, even if I'm intimidated by these big networking sessions and stuff, just going and talking to people about their science is like the best starting point. And then you do make real connections that way. So I'd say that's a jumping in point, at least.
And hopefully something like this is helpful too, right? Now we have a bunch of people sitting up here. The idea is that you can ask also, you can be sitting in the audience and asking questions on your phone like Rui is. And like, that's a good way. And I hope that there continue to be more options like that, where we think about how to engage lots of different type of people, because there's talent all over.
I'm going to follow up with Peter. Actually, I'll get a little sentimental. For me, it was FlowTex. I was single person in graduate school. I was a single person at WashU. I was somewhat of a single person here until Joel started to put together a users group, which was 18 years ago. And then it's like, I found a very helpful community, a community of the few people that got us started, where you come to the realization that flow is an enormous field, and no matter how many years you've put into it, you don't know everything. And I found out there were things that I didn't know, that Joel knew, that Karen Dreyer knew, that Amy knew, that I didn't. And one of those ideas ended up turning into a small paper for Amy and myself. But it was a community where I could ask, I said, oh, this is a stupid question. I shouldn't ask this. I'm going to show what a moron I am. And it finds out, no, other people actually had the same question. So even though so many of us were in the industry for as long as we have, there was no such thing as a dumb question. And that just kept feeding, and we all just learned more off of each other, because Joel has experiences in areas that I don't. Same for Dreyer. I've been doing nano for umpteen years since I've been at Methodist. So people come to me with their nanotechnology questions. So this FlowTex community is where I got my start, where I am with ISAC. And everything I've done with ISAC, I owe everything to FlowTex. So if you need a networking community, you're in it right now.
I'll second that. The first Cyto I attended was in Baltimore in 2011. And it was the first big meeting that I'd ever been to. FlowTex I attended the year before. And I was really nervous about Cyto. It was so big and there's so many people and I was alone. So I had attended FlowTex the year before and I thought, I'm going to find those Texas people. And when I found them, I just didn't let them go anywhere without. And that's really how it started. FlowTex helped me gain a lot of knowledge, a lot of confidence, and a network that always had my back. We are great at connecting each other with other people if we need to, if we don't have the answers. And they also did something for my career that I would have never done voluntarily. They've forced me to be the president as well, right?
I'm gonna second everything Marilla is saying.
Really?
Yeah.
Forced to be.
Yeah,
Many people.
that's how it happened. And like David said, there's no question that we can't ask each other. We really don't judge each other. We don't have big egos here. You can come in and say, listen, I really don't know a lot about this. Do you think you can help me? We will help you. Like, we are here to help each other. So connect with the FlowTex community.
Yeah, I want to echo that. My first FlowTex was 2010 as well. And latched on to the Texas FlowTex community or Flow community when I went to the big Cytos. And I remember that first one, Joel's like, hey, you want to be on the committee? Sure, I guess. But no, it really helped me to expand my network in that role. And it is, you start small and remember it's a gradual thing. Building your network is not going to happen overnight. And latch on to a few people that know many people and get those introductions. And that's very helpful as well.
You do what Ben said, and before you'll know it, you'll have international recognition, believe it or not.
Yeah, no, I'd also, not to put too fine a point on it, but I got kind of to go along to the Great Lakes meeting, GLIFCA, and then also Cyto when I was brand new in the Corps as a technician. And my boss at the time made such a point to say, no, yes, he's new, but he has to come, he's got to learn, and invested in me. And that's how I got that first data job. Was I was talking to Nikesh, who founded Cytobank, just enthusiastically being like, computers and cytometry over beers, this is great. And I, just being enthusiastic, I was having a great time. And then a year later, he was like, hey, I need somebody. I know Jeff lives in Michigan. Maybe he'll be interested in this job. I know he's like, at least, enthusiastic enough. And I had that opportunity because I went to GLIFCA, because my Corps manager took me as a technician. And he left the Corps before I did, so he wasn't like depleting, his staff to go out other places. But if you can go to these meetings, so you're already 90% of the way there. If you can try to submit posters, it's a little touch and go with funding these days, but Cyto is a fantastic place to network. And just experience cytometry from around the world, and is a really, really excellent opportunity. So if you're a manager or a Corps director, send your staff. If you are staff, ask to see if there's an avenue for you to get to these conferences, because it's really a powerful opportunity.
I want to plug Cyto as well. It is it's really important because it's a smaller conference. We've all been, or I've been to many bigger ones where you're just kind of lost, but the cytometry community is really tight knit. And so it is a great way, even if your field is, let's say, in neuroscience or immunology or something, it's not primarily in cytometry. It is still a great way to build your network because there's so many events that you can go to where some of the straight up immunology, or straight up neuroscience or whatever, they don't have the events like cytometry has. It's a big networking conference. So I really want to promote that just from a networking standpoint. Yeah.
And we on this side want to promote ICCS.
Exactly, yeah.
They have working committees, join working committees, and then just reiterating, your time is valuable. If you find yourself in a committee that's toxic, get out of it, right? So it's not only finding your group, it's finding a group that's healthy. And I know, Joel, in your leadership and, David, some of the stuff you've done, you've really set the bar for this group to always treat each other with respect.
Yeah, no, I'd really like to reiterate that, go to those other meetings. I think, one, go to the smaller regional meetings if that's you get more at your comfort level, because of Cyto, I remember my very first time I'd used cytometry in my career, but really was the first time I was actually becoming a cytometrist. And really was overwhelming. There were so many people, so many talks I wanted to go to, but the smaller regional meetings like this are much easier to be able to develop those relationships. And then my second point will be, for the clinical flow, ICCS is a fantastic group. They have really good networking development programs within the society as well. And, really good talks structured around both sort of junior people as well as more senior people to be able to help you network and find your people, as it were. Yeah. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I would echo all of the things that you guys said. I think that one thing that needs to be also pointed out is that for that type of networking, you really require very good drinking skills. And
No, because
so
cytometry community that don't drink, you just need to be able to stand there and hold a beverage.
right, exactly. Pretend.
Yeah.
But for those of you who don't have those strong drinking skills and have somewhat of a fear to speak with people in public, etc., I think one way to start is exactly these kind of forums, like the YouTube channel here. Every year, I see a lot of people taking initiative to actually answer the questions that the audience is asking the speakers. In fact, I hired Anna Longini, my former scientific manager, based not solely, but in part based on the fact that I already knew her from these forums, and actually was FlowTex forums where I started seeing her answering a lot of these questions. Other forums like Discord are also a very good way because there's a lot of engagement. People are going back and forth, and you start knowing some of the people that you've never seen them anywhere, and suddenly they're there answering questions, giving their opinions. And then once they come to meetings like this, it's way they've already gone one or two steps above in terms of getting themselves known. And I think that also builds confidence, to the person that's trying to take initiatives, etc. And then comes to a place like this that could be very daunting. They already have some connection, and they already know some of the people, and those experts also know them. So I think that's a very helpful way to start building your network and getting yourself known out there.
I agree. I think it leads into other questions too that we've had about how can you network effectively if you don't necessarily have the budget or the time to travel. And I think exactly that is kind of the way to do it, is use the online communities, because it's pretty robust now. I'm gonna go, Sean.
Hello, Ben. So I have a two-part question. The first is more specific to Sarah. So you have a pretty unique trajectory where you were in a core, you left or you're getting your PhD now, but you want to go back to the core, right?
Doing it backwards, inside out.
Yeah. So I'm just curious about like your motivation in doing that. And the second part is for I think people who have ran or directed a core without a PhD. So I think Carla, Meredith, I don't know if I'm missing anyone, but feel free to chime in. Oh, Nico. Yeah. Did you feel like you had to face any more challenges or like work harder to get buy-in from scientists or just anything?
I think it's a good question. Thank you for teeing me up. Sean helped us do a practice session last night at the bar. So yeah, my trajectory is a little different, and it took me more time to. I've always been passionate about science and very interested in it, but I thought because of sort of the work style, I would not want to do research for my career. And in fact, when I took the job at the MD Anderson Flow Corps, I was leaving a very toxic lab, and I had to, I was only 2 years out of college. I didn't have to keep working in, medical research at all. And I took the interview because I needed a job. And I also needed a job that was going to be good on the resume. And MD Anderson's a great place for that. But I remember I took the interview. I met everybody on the team, which is another cool thing that Karen does, is to really incorporate the whole team to have a good environment. And I got into the car and I sat down and I was like, that was awesome, but I don't want to do research. Like, I don't want to be in the research field anymore. But ultimately I took it because, like I said, I needed a job, and I was like, at the very least, it's MD Anderson, it's good on your CV. But it totally changed everything, and it showed me this kind of intersection between like an interpersonal thing and really high quality science and research and reproducibility, which brings like all of these things that I really care about, which are making it as good and ultimately as effective for improving human health and knowledge. So I think that's it for me. And I do really like the research, and I've realized as I've gotten into the right spheres, that also helped me to realize that the environment is critical. So if you're in a place that you hate going to every day, you're worse at your job. You're worse at everything in your life. And you are smart and already have skills. You can leave that job. You can leave any job. I can, and actually a lot of, because of this community, part of the reason I think I've been kind of calm in grad school is I've always known if at any point I hated it, I could quit and get a job, like because of these people. So yeah, anyway, that's my piece of it, is do the thing that you're really interested in. And this worked for me in terms of work like style and also intellectual interest. So I guess on the the other thing that we talked about, part of the reason I decided to get a PhD is because I have seen some struggles from people without a PhD who are running a core. You, um, you, you have to have somebody with a PhD or an MD to fund your core if you work in an academic space, because you cannot apply for a grant independently. So that's another big part of it, is that this is thinking about, oh, I want to be in a leadership position, but you're really cut off at the knees in terms of how you can protect people's jobs. So that's a big part of why I'm doing this. I would not recommend it exclusively for that. I also really like doing research, but that was sort of what got me into it, and I've luckily blossomed to find that I like that more than I thought that I would even. But yeah, that was kind of my career strategy. And also I'm young enough that I feel like I'll get a good return on it. So don't just go for your PhD if you're thinking about getting an upgrade in your salary eventually.
Sean, thank you for asking the question. Carla, Nico, and I specifically wanted to be on this panel and show that you can do this without a PhD. It's really important to me. I've actually many times at Cyto have stood up and said, thank you for speaking, but you all have PhDs. How are you going to help the rest of us who don't have PhDs get to where we are? I think it's really important to talk about. I have been lucky enough to work under many women flow cytometrists, which is super awesome, that don't have PhDs. So they really paved the way for me and showed me that I could do it. There are struggles. And while I was at Harvard, I was actually pushed by my faculty director to get my master's. So something I didn't mention is I actually did an online master's through Harvard. I have a master's in biotech management. I don't mention it a lot because it's technically not an MS, but people never ask me. They just assume it's an MS. They assume that I did, years in a lab and wrote a thesis, but actually I ended up just writing like a 20-page thesis on flow cytometry at the end of it, which was pretty cool. So I did it while I was working in the core, and part of the reason why I did it was just to help me say, plus my certification, plus the master's that, again, no one ever asks me about. All they say is, wow, you got your master's at Harvard. I'm like, yeah, I did. So it just gives me like one more thing to help me. But I do run into, the PhDs that assume that I don't deserve respect because I do not have a PhD. And it just makes me work harder to earn their trust. And I earn their trust through showing them that I know what I'm talking about. I can help you make your experiments beautiful. But you have to ask for that help. And if you're not going to ask for the help, then I'm not going to help you. So if you choose that I'm not good enough because I don't have a PhD, then fine. I don't want to help you either, but if you're open to being helped, then I will help you. But I have seen enough people who have done it. I think no matter what, I will always have either a faculty oversight committee or a faculty director that gets paid off the FlowCore budget. And it's just a matter of understanding that. And in my case, I have seen good faculty oversight and bad faculty oversight, and that's the most challenging part.
Yeah, for me, I got some ceiling because I didn't have the PhD. Mostly for funding, you need to have a PhD to get grants. So I had to have a faculty that was putting his name for the funding, also for promotion. When you're a master and ask for a promotion, especially when you go in the directing position, you want a faculty position in university. I always had pushback from academia to get that faculty position. On the other side, at BD, for me, worked well. They had to change the requirement for the position for me because normally for my position, you need a PhD, but my manager was willing to do thought with HR to change it, to make it with 10 years experience and a master, you can get that position. And we got it, and that's how I got promoted at BD. So depend on your situation, your manager, a lot of things. But yeah, having a PhD can help in your career.
Yeah, I experienced the same things Nico did. When Ben was recruited over to Regeneron and I was promoted to lead the lab, I was only allowed to have an associate director position because I didn't have a PhD. So I didn't have a director, but nobody cared that that I was just the associate director, even though I was the one leading the lab. I always had a scientific advisor to oversee the lab. The university felt like I couldn't report to the cancer center because I didn't have a PhD. I've never minded having a scientific director. Mike was my scientific director in the end. Before Mike, Vivian Rebel was our scientific director. This actually, to me, was a great opportunity to work with someone, get ideas from someone else, right? We worked great together. And as Ben mentioned, it also gave us the opportunity in the core to have these strong relationships with people at the university that had a voice and that would fight for us. So I never took offense to the scientific director, but there were some times where I was removed on the cancer center presentation and somebody else was slotted in as the director of the lab because I didn't have a PhD. So those are definitely issues that, you know, hopefully will improve over time. As a lot of people in flow cytometry know that this is a very technical field and we gain our skills over time and diligence. And it's not always required to have a PhD to lead these labs.
I think there's one correction, which is that you can apply for an NIH S10 grant without a PhD. That's an important thing to know, is that you can get instrumentation. And then to Carla's point, and kind of as I'm listening, what I'm thinking about, and this was a discussion point last night too, is like leading the core lab is not the same skill set as what you learn in an academic PhD. Like, it's really not it. So I think maybe what we need is a better interface with academic and industry and probably also government agencies and grant funding agencies to understand, like, what is that job and who is the right person for it? Because yeah, it's not necessarily both. Now, on the other hand, I think maybe Rui should comment on this because he's done a good job of implementing leadership structures that are not necessarily centered around that in an institution that really values the degrees that are there and kind of making them understand what it is. And then I had one more point that's gone now, but if you don't mind talking about kind of how to get the right people in those jobs.
I actually have a relatively negative view on that. Sorry to say that, but so for many years I've been an advocate of I started seeing early in my career when I started working in flow cytometry. I had a PhD. I wasn't thinking of working in flow cytometry, and I just happened to have a PhD, and I saw the advantage of that, and I saw how the community is actually going more in the direction of requiring more and more people with PhDs to be at the leadership of a core facility. The thing is, I learned most of the people I learned from actually didn't have any PhDs, and they were actually really remarkable at running flow core facilities. They were very good at engaging the community. They were very good at providing the services they were providing. And I actually knew several PhDs which were really terrible at managing a core facility. So there was no correlation at all. And I kept bringing up this in forums of discussion that I think, as we move forward with this, we're trying to build career structures in core facilities, like flow core facilities. And we're bringing people straight out of college, telling them, hey, come and start a career in flow cytometry. But by the way, when you get to the top, you're not going to be allowed to run a core facility because you don't have a PhD. So really what we should be saying to these people that are, finishing their college degrees is go and take a PhD like Sarah. And then if you want to not work directly in science and work in a core, then yes, you'll be much better suited to for this career. So I think there is, we're moving in that direction, and it hasn't stopped. And this was at least 15 years ago when I started bringing this up. I haven't seen things change, except for the opposite. So I do think we're getting to a point where we really need to discuss this at the highest levels with forums like ABRF that fight for core facilities interests, and really start discussing with the leadership of academic institutions that we need to move away from this model. Scientists think that only PhDs know how to make decisions in science, right? And this is not the case. And so we need to change that model. Again, that's why I was saying I have a very negative view in the sense that I'm not seeing anyone really go in that direction. But I do think we need to, because it's very important for people here, right? You're seeing really remarkable people that have done such an incredible job in pushing science forward with their work in these core facilities, and yet they're not being recognized, and they've had to struggle to get to the point where they could help you scientists, right? So yeah, we need to really engage this as much as possible. Oh, you go ahead. I'm
not familiar. Okay. I don't know if any of you also went to this career shop at Cyto last year, but Australia is actively losing people in these technological jobs, and they're really struggling to get in. So one thing that they're doing in Australia has actually started an associate program. So you don't even have to get a bachelor's, but they're pushing people into associate degrees to be able to run microscopy cores, flow cytometry cores, sequencing cores. I think it's a really great model, and I'm really kind of excited to see how Australia really starts implementing it and pushing it, and how it works on a higher up level. I don't know if any of you saw that talk, but I'm really excited to see it, and I'm hoping that we can do something. There was talk about even bringing flow cytometers in the US into community colleges to help encourage, even in the United States, to have people who are technologists that are specialized in these schools at an associate level, so not even a bachelor's level, running cores. And I think that's like a really great thing because, like Rui said, there's not a lot of traction going on, but there should be. And on that point, I'm just wondering how many people in the audience actually don't have a PhD. So for those of you in the audience, it's about 50%. So if you're in the audience and you don't have a PhD, you are far from alone. There are many of us out there.
I remembered one thing I totally forgot that I was going to plug for Rui is that he mentioned also bringing scientists like immunologists into the core because it does also help. You do still need that scientific direction if you really want to push it. And so finding a space where it merges too, right? You can still do really interesting research science in a core as well. So I don't know how the interface works, but aside from making a really good job there. Can you check, is it on?
There should be like an on button on the top.
Yeah.
Like a switch. No, now. Now
Oh.
it's on.
Yeah. What would it take to create a small program that probably isn't a PhD for technologists in flow cytometry or a certificate that would give that bureaucratic degree for people in core managers?
I guess the certification is meant to help in that way, but to your point, to get it being an accredited degree would, like an associate's, would really benefit. And I think the answer from what we've seen over the development of this field and everybody who's sitting here is like, do it. If you think it's a good idea, do it and get people to help.
I mean, it's something that associations like this could push for.
Yeah.
That's actually why my master's is biotech management. It was specifically to have that managerial title afterwards to push a university to say, well, she may not have a PhD, but she actually has a degree in management, so she can balance a budget. Which Sean asked me, like, did you take any classes in your master's that have helped you run a core? I took more accounting classes than I'd want to admit. Can I do my own taxes? No, I don't want to. But can I balance a budget really well? Yes, I can. And do I understand what depreciation is? 100%.
Yeah, I just want to point out that, not to confuse, the point is not, people are not looking for individuals with a certain degree or qualification. It's more that science leadership only understands a person that has a PhD. They don't know how to evaluate anyone else. They are the ones that and HR, right? They are the ones that hire us, and they don't understand. If you don't have a PhD, it's like talking to anyone in the streets that doesn't have any scientific knowledge or background. So it starts there. So they can only look at. I've had actually many job interviews where they're looking at my scientific productivity as a core manager, right? It's not about scientific productivity. Of course, if you're good enough, you eventually get that. But it's not about that. You could be really good and not publish anything, right? So I think this is the biggest problem. So yeah, we do have certificate programs, etc., but they will never get to that point. It has to be the opposite. It has to be scientific leadership to understand what do we really need for science and for core facilities. Do we need just people with PhDs, or it's more about what are your managerial skills? What are your communication skills? What are your scientific skills also, right? So it all comes together. This is my opinion.
It's off, not on.
Can you
Turn it on.
I think another important thing we as a field would need to establish then is what exactly does a flow core do? And so I'm thinking about my own experience. I'm the only person in my flow core. It's all me all the time. And so I run the machines, I maintain them, I do all the budget, I'll do all that stuff. But then also people come to me with experiments like, why is this not working? And so I go over it and say, oh, this isn't a real control. This is the type of control you need. And so like to provide that scientific support, be able to look at an experimental design, be able to really assess in depth, is this experiment addressing the question you want? That takes a very different kind of expertise. And is that something that a flow core should be able to provide? And if so, where are people going to get that expertise? Because a lot of that does come from the type of graduate research of doing research projects. And so we would really need to think about what should a core be able to provide? Is that something a core director should be able to do?
Well, I think in best case scenario, it does it all. But okay, we are almost on time, which is unbelievable. I want to
Can we just hear from Dan, maybe Peter and Jeff a little bit about not so much flow cytometry core jobs? Like,
yeah, please.
Yeah, because I think that's valuable. Sorry to put you guys on the spot, but I feel like it's valuable for the audience to understand like a career in flow isn't just going to be in the core facility, and it's not just in sales, instrument sales, reagent sales, service sales. What you guys do really helps us keep running, and you just have different skill sets that are so important for us. So if we can hear from you guys a little.
Sure. So lots of people have come from the flow community into BD, into other companies. Some people come into field service. So if you have a little bit of a technical background, good with multimeter, good with otoscope, even just good with computers, you might be able to pull a field service job. A lot of people go application scientists, sales. We even had a flow core manager become field service, and now he's a district manager. So if you go really deep into the history of BD, we had a guy who was a field service, went to sales, and eventually VP. So there's a path there that comes right from being a customer to being a VP.
All right. Yeah, no, I'd say it's important to get your chops somewhere. So I started in a core, or whether it's like a PhD and you're just like a core super user, while you're getting your graduate degree, you pick up a lot of knowledge. But I think it's important to have some expertise somewhere. It's really tough to walk into positions in industry. I mean, field service engineers, you get the skills somewhere else and you have your chops there. But if you're going to be talking to somebody as a representative of a company, whether it's apps or sales or anything, you have to know what you're talking about. People can smell when you don't know what you're talking about really quickly in cytometry. So that from very early on, be good at your job. Like that's step one prerequisite across the board. But once you can have even just a little corner of expertise, and you're able to teach other people a little bit about something that you know. It really find the job or find the company, find the people that you like working for and you like working with, and it's there's a whole selection of different companies, a whole selection of different products that would love to have people who know what they're talking about work for them. So it's whether it's software or reagents or hardware, there's a lot you can do, and a lot of it is just kind of knowing that it exists. And then absolutely feel free to come up and talk to any one of us. If you don't want to stand up and ask us a question, we'll be around. And I'm so happy to tell you in more detail about my experience. But yeah, I don't know, Peter, go for it.
Yeah, coming from the R&D perspective, sometimes these jobs feel a little amorphous because you're like making new things. I had used a flow cytometer, but I was not a cytometrist. I had never run a cell or compensation or anything like that before joining. So in R&D, we do hire like professional engineers, so mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, optical people, et cetera. And they may have a PhD, they may not. They may have worked at a company like TSMC or big semiconductor companies, et cetera, before coming. Others did work in a lab. They did a PhD. They tinkered and put little things together. And that ability to solve problems and integrate and troubleshoot and think from different perspectives, that's incredibly valuable in R&D roles, in flow specifically, because these systems are so complicated. So for those who are coming from that more academic background and you're like, I've learned a ton of stuff and I find it all interesting, but I don't feel qualified for like any real job. Like I didn't feel that way either, and arguably wasn't, but you can kind of find a position where like that's what they're looking for. And that's where talking to people, keeping your eye on these job postings, like those roles do exist. There aren't always a ton of them open, but those opportunities are there. And yeah, I'd also be happy to kind of describe that path in more detail with anyone who's interested.
Okay, we got one more person, so let's do it. Make sure that thing is on. It's
There's a switch on
the
top.
side.
We can also repeat your question for you.
Yeah, we can repeat it.
Okay. It's not a question, it's just a comment and a follow-up for this great discussion. A lot of times, or people may be in the situation where opportunities don't really arise for them in that particular environment, don't forget that you can create your own opportunities as well. So think outside the box. If your boss or your mentor or your director doesn't call you in for a special project, create the project yourself. You find something that is a problem, work on it and create a solution yourself and offer it. Think outside the box. For example, you want to improve in your leadership skills and you're not offered a leadership task. That's okay. You can get that outside your job. Maybe you are in sports. You play sports, you play soccer. You can be a leader team or lead a group outside your work. It may be one of your hobbies. Or maybe you like teaching. You can teach in one of your hobbies. And that can help you create or work on those skills of people skills, soft skills, leadership skills, management skills, so on and so forth. So don't be limited by whatever your environment is offering you or whether those opportunities arise or not. Or maybe they arise, but you don't catch them. You also can create your own opportunities as well, inside and outside your profession. So use that in your advantage as well.
I think that's a great sentiment and something probably everybody's going to agree with. Okay, now we're slightly less on time, but still pretty good. So the next part of this session is meant to be a little bit more open. So for everybody who is in this room, if you don't already have a career networking badge, this is meant to be an indicator that you can walk up to somebody and talk to them about your career. We've heard introductions from a bunch of people in this room. You maybe have an idea where they work. Please feel free to engage them. I mean, don't follow them into the bathroom, but if they're around, they have been volunteered. They've agreed to to work with people on that. And then I will encourage you at the very least to introduce yourself to somebody that you haven't met, because that could end up being an interesting networking thing. And then for our YouTube people, this is a long break, but I'll ask you, please, just if you're logged in, to just drop in the chat that little introduction, like what's your name, where do you work, and how'd you get started in Flow, just so that we can maybe make some of those connections. But we're going to do the networking session here and then also in the vendor hall. Like I said, please try and engage with people. We'll have lunch and then we'll be back at 1 p.m. So thank you to the speakers and everybody who asked questions.